Hey everyone, what is going on, and welcome back to another video from A Man Talks NRL SuperCoach. And in today's video, I'm going to be taking you through 8 tips that I used in my previous season to help me improve my overall rank, and hopefully you guys can use these tips as well to improve your standing in this year's season. Well, let's get into it. So just a brief background, I guess, on my kind of 2020 ranking and how I went during the season. So start of my season was really bad. By round 4 I had dropped to a rank that was even below 30,000. It was just an absolutely atrocious start to the season. Just had some horrible picks in my team, but implementing some of these tips and strategies that I'm going to be talking about throughout this video, I really was able to see some good gains into my rank, and I was able to end the season at about 6k, which wasn't ideal, but from where I was in round 4, that means in those 16 rounds I was able to increase my rank by about 25,000 spots, which was really good. So I think hopefully if I can use some of those tips from the beginning of this season, I should hopefully be able to improve on that last season rank of about 6k. But let's not waste any more time and let's get into the tips. So the first tip I have is to really keep faith in your gun SuperCoach players and don't feel the need to rage trade them unless there's a good reason to do so. So just as a quick example, I'll start off with my main man, James Tedesco. In 2019 and 2020, his round 1 scores 23 and 39 points. When you're paying close to 800k plus for Teddy, we want to be seeing the 100-point scores, right? And one could very easily just look at that 23-point or 39-point game and go, you know what, I'm not going to get the value. He's going to drop in price. Now that that's rolling in his break even, I've got to get him out of the team. But look at what he's done after that. 2019, he went 52, then he smashes out 133, 84, 76, back to the Teddy that we know. And obviously last season, I think 39, but he followed that up with 85, 103, that massive 199, 63, which is a bit meh, but then 108, 178, unbelievable. This is why you got to keep faith in your gun players. When you choose these gun players, you know that you've got them for a reason. You know that they can either go big or that they're super consistent. It's always really be important to be looking at a gun player, and if they've had an off game, instead of just kind of having that rage trade mentality that we sometimes get, because we'll get really emotional about our players, right? I think it's really important to kind of assess why they may have done that poorly in a game, whether the team had a good defensive strategy, say if it's an attacking player, or if the ball just wasn't going down the side of, say, a defending player, so they just weren't getting the same amount of tackles or run meters that they normally would. I think it's really important to say, look at the stats, look at the opponent, and really then figure out, I guess, if that performance is something that's likely to continue, or if it was just maybe a one-off. Because I think it's really important to keep faith in these gun players, if they're proven over previous seasons as well. I think just roll with the low games and you'll be rewarded with the high games. So next up, I've got don't chase previous points, or as you might have commonly heard, don't chase last week's points. Basically what this means is that, if a player seems to have done really well in 1 week, don't just be jumping on them expecting the same. Really I think it's about evaluating that kind of performance that someone might have had, or say a run of good games. And look at their statistics, look at the opposition, and then make a decision for yourself whether that's likely to continue or if it's something that was just a one-off. So my kind of example from last season was I brought in James Fisher-Harris in round 11 last season, and just looking at that graphic there, before that round 11 he was getting 88, 58, 76, 64, 59, 50. Not bad scores. I think it was the 88 that really swayed me though. Right. Yes, his average was good in those games before that 88, but I think I saw that 88-point game and I thought, yes, you know what, I think I needed a mid 500k front row forward at the time, and I thought, oh yeah, Fisher-Harris is good, he's just knocked out an 88, I'm going to get him, but I didn't really look at his statistics to try to figure out maybe if that was a one-off game or if there's something underlying which might think he's going to actually drop off, say, in performance. And I got rewarded with some absolute stinkers: 44, 50, 49, 54, 51, and 40. I held him through all this time waiting for that 88 or that 70 or even a 60-point game. I just didn't get it from him. And, it was just kind of, I just didn't know why, that was the case. And looking at the statistics, I could say, yes, potentially his minutes were down. He just wasn't getting the base output. He was playing the same position, but maybe it was the opposition. Maybe that opposition that he was versing had done particularly well against defending against, say, front row forwards. That's not something I looked into. I just saw the 88 and I thought, yep, he's going to be good for me, I'll get him in. So I think it's really important to, when you're bringing in players, trying to see if they have particularly come off a really good run of games, just asking yourself, is that something that they're likely to keep up? If yes, and it's based on, say, some good statistical performance, or they've got a good run of games coming up, then fine, good time to bring in a player. But, if it's some random player who you've never really heard of, who's never really been SuperCoach relevant, and they've just scored a hat-trick, and they've just smacked out 150 points, don't just get them in if that was just a one-off. I think it's about really assessing their kind of long-term performance, and also their opposition coming up, and then you'll be able to make a good informed decision as to whether that player is actually worth bringing in for that week. So next up, we've got cash cows. Chasing cash cows, I think, really integral to begin a season, especially because something that I've kind of touched on in some of my previous videos when I've been talking about the cash cows in every position. I think it's really important to be increasing your team value at the beginning of the season. What this enables us is that because of the fixed $9.9 million salary cap we've got at the start of the season, we just don't have the budget to be bringing in all the gun players that we would like to. We have to make some sacrifices in certain positions. But what cash cows enable us to do is that if we can land the right cash cows to begin the season, they should be increasing in value for us. And then what that enables us to do later on in the season is to either then upgrade them to those gun players that we really want, or then say downgrade them back to really cheap players, and then we will collect the money, and then we can use that money to then upgrade other players. It's pretty straightforward. And so I think really getting the early season cash cows is really important for your setting you up really nicely for the latter part of the season, where you can really maximize the amount of gun players that you get into your 25-man squad. But that doesn't just mean that cash cows are only going to be there at the beginning of the season. There will be some that come later in the season, and I think the good times to kind of spot when potential cash cows might arise is, say, if there's any injuries to key players midway through the season. Say hypothetically, like the starting halfback at a team goes down with an injury, and they've had to then bring up someone from say reserve grade to fill in that spot. More than likely, if they haven't been playing a single minute of NRL in the past, they're probably going to be listed really, really cheap, 170k potentially. And then, if you're looking for someone, say, later on in the season to be increasing your squad value further, or you're looking for just a good cheap player who will make you some money, that's the time when then you can, say, jump on like a mid-season cash cow. And then looking through Team List Tuesday as well, scouting for, say, any injuries that might have occurred over a weekend's matches. It's obviously going to be the best time to see if there's any kind of newbie players that have been introduced into a starting 17 for a team. Then you'll be able to find and identify some more cash cows. But I think cash cow is really, really important at the start of the season. There is a place for them midway through a season as well, I think. But you wouldn't want to be getting too many cash cows, I think, towards the end of the season. That's when you should be really focusing on getting your kind of guns and enough strategy in place, where you're getting a lot of gun players and then a lot of other players who just don't really want to be scoring points for you, because you're never really going to be playing them, and they just kind of create some benching and auto emergency headaches. So I think, cash cows at the start of the season, really, really important. During the midway through the season, the origin period and injuries really create good opportunities for cash cows to come about as well. And then just generally looking through Team List Tuesday to see if there's any kind of players who are filling in for injured players. So next up, I've got trades are treasure. Now, trades are insanely valuable in for your team, and it makes sense, right? That's the thing that will allow you to bring in certain players, trade out, your underperforming ones, but it's really important that you hold on to your trades at certain parts of the season. So we get 37 trades across 20 rounds in the SuperCoach season, and we're allowed to use a maximum of 2 per round. So what that means is we obviously can't be using 2 every round for the entire season. There are going to be times where we're going to either need to hold our trades or not use any at all, So for me, the best time that you want to be saving your trades for is for the origin period, later on in the season when a lot of injuries occur, and later on in the season as well when there's a lot of team rotation and resting that goes on. So that's why I think preserving trades early on in the season really is a good strategy, because we also just don't quite know yet what the kind of long-term trends are for players and how they're performing. So I think it's safe to kind of not use trades in the first round, unless obviously you've got injuries that have cropped up in your team, or there's just a genuine cash cow that you didn't really consider has come out of nowhere, and you just want to get that player into your team. So there are certain times when you can, say, attack the early rounds of the season with trades. But personally, I like having trades, up my sleeve for later in the season, so that you can deal with the origin period where there's a lot of rotation and resting that goes on. Later in the season, typically injuries will start to rear their head. Obviously, the wear and tear that the players are putting themselves through will mean that there's more likely to be injuries later on in the season. And the worst kind of situation is, say, if you have your starting fullback, James Tedesco, your captain, set and forget, best player in the game, and it comes to the last round of the season and he's injured and you have no more trades left, you can't make the switch to any other fullback, right? And that's a lot of money that you'd have to be leaving in your bench that's not getting used at all. So I think having trades to accommodate for injuries is really, really important for overall ranking purposes, and also for head-to-head. If you're a head-to-head player, having trades will now allow you to kind of match your opponent in terms of what players they have. So for me, I think holding trades early on in the season is a really good strategy. I think it's really important to be conservative with them where you can. You plan out your trades as well and try to identify opportunities or rounds where you can save a trade, or even save both your trades, if you're really happy with how your team looks. And I think I don't want to be wasting trades on, say, gun players, which kind of touches on my first tip about keeping faith in guns. Say, for example, Angus Crichton has been performing, say, 5 points average below Madison. You might be thinking, I'm going to make the trade from Crichton to Madison, for example, but there's no injuries. They're both playing kind of a similar draw. The points difference between them isn't that much. I think you need to ask yourself, do I need to make this trade? Is there a way that I can actually cover this better? Can I make an improvement somewhere else in my team as opposed to a more sideways move like Crichton to Madison? So I think asking yourself that question of, will I need this player back soon? And can I use this trade better? Is there somewhere else in my team that I think I can make an improvement? Say, for example, you've got 200k in the bank, you've got Angus Crichton, and you think he's not performing well, so you want to go from Crichton to Madison. Fine, that could be one trade. But say, for example, you've got, Jamal Fogarty potentially as your starting half, but you don't have Nathan Cleary, and Cleary's just about to go on a massive run of easy games, where he could go big. What's more important? Is it doing that Crichton to Madison trade, or is it doing that Fogarty to Cleary trade? It's probably going to be the latter. So I know that's probably in more of an extreme example, but that's kind of what I wanted to highlight, is that it's really important to be making good choices with your trades, going for kind of bigger impact moves on your team, and not doing so many sideways trades. Next up, I've got chasing pods. So I find a lot of our SuperCoach players, we love a good pod or point of difference player. This is just abbreviated. So it's really nice to see a low owned player who we can pick up, who scores really well for us, because we're going against the crowd, we're getting points in a way that not many other players are getting, so we feel like we're getting a good advantage here. And I think pods definitely do have their place. It's always good to be getting pods into your team, so long as they will get you points. There's no point getting pods if they're going to be useless for you, but the only upside of them is that they're low owned. The important thing, I think, is to focus on the players who you think will get you the most points, and ignore ownership to an extent. If I see, so say, for example, I've just kind of put this little example here. It's a bit of an extreme one, but just bear with me. We've got Carl Felt and Val Holmes. They both play for the same team. Their average based on last year's performance was 0.1 point difference between the two of them, and so as a result, their price is basically similar. You're trying to decide, I'm going to get one of these two, say for a trade in for that week. You look and see Carl Felt is 1% owned, and you see Val Holmes is 12% owned. Someone who's who loves a good pod would be, oh yeah, I'll get Carl Felt. But it's not so straightforward as that. It's about looking at the underlying statistics of their player. What kind of stuff do they have going for them? Val Holmes, say, got goal kicking. Carl Felt is more reliant on, say, scoring tries. And so I don't think it's just necessarily going to be a case of saying, oh yeah, I'm going to get Carl Felt because he's owned by 1%. He could go and get a run of, say, 20 points a game, and Val Holmes could go and get a run of, say, 70 points a game, So I think it's a bit of an extreme example, because I don't think many people will be going for Carl Felt, but a lot will be going for Val Holmes. But that's part of the decision making, right? Val Holmes has got good pedigree, and we know that he can go big in SuperCoach. Carl Felt, not so much, right? So I think it's not so straightforward to just make your decision purely based on the ownership and go, oh yeah, I'm going to get Felt because he's 1% owned, compared to Val Holmes, who's 12% owned. Similar price, similar average, but that doesn't matter. We know that Val Holmes is so much better of a SuperCoach player than Carl Felt traditionally, So I think that's really important to just not really focus too much on pods. They do have their place, but they're not the be-all and end-all. And sometimes I think people forget this as well. Having a lot of highly owned players in itself can be a point of difference. Say, for example, you have 6 guns in your second row forward position, right? Every single one of those second row forward positions players could be owned by at least 15% of the game, hypothetically. But say on average, most teams around you have only got 4 of them. doesn't matter that all 6 of those second row forward gun players that you have are highly owned. The fact that you have all 6 of them compared to, say, maybe 3 or 4 of other teams is a point of difference in itself. I think sometimes that tends to get overlooked. Having a combination of highly owned players can be the differential itself. So I think there's nothing wrong with going with highly owned players, because typically they're the ones who will get the most points, and that's ultimately what we want to be improving your rank. The pods are good, they've got their place, but I think chasing pointless pods is a strategy I'd want to be advising strongly, so that you just don't fall into a trap of bad pod players. So next up, I've got dissecting the draw. So I think it's really important when kind of evaluating your trade decisions or players you're looking to bring in. It's really good, I think, to always be looking at the games that are upcoming for a team, and that will help then inform your decision as to whether that player you're thinking of bringing in is going to be a good buy, basically. And so like I've had videos previously on this channel where I've talked about the teams that have the best and the worst start to the season, but it's a really useful tool, and it sounds straightforward, right? But I think a lot of players just don't do it. They look at a player and see, oh, he scored 100 points last week, I'm going to get him in. But then he could go on a run where he versus the Roosters, the Storm, the Rabbitohs, the Raiders, the Eels, 5 games straight, and then that player then averages 25 for the next 5 games. That player's not going to, without having done that kind of little bit of research into what's coming up for that player that they're looking to bring in, they might have shot themselves in the foot. So I think it's really important to be like looking at the draw and what's upcoming for every team. And so that kind of brings me on to another point as well, that teams will defend differently against positions. This little graphic that I've got here comes again from NRL SuperCoach stats, and it just shows you teams will perform better against certain positions. So for example, if you want to look at, say, the Gold Coast Titans in the top row, they actually defend the fullback position very well. They're, in terms of the points that are scored against them, they rank 14th. They defend fullbacks very well, but they are liable to be conceding a lot of points from their hooker or, say, the front row and the halves. So I think even just doing simple kind of checks like that throughout the season, it helps you decide. If you think, okay, it's the Cowboys versus the Titans, and Val Holmes is playing fullback, I'm going to get him in, because he's had a run of low scores, but I think he can do really well against the Titans. He's going to be a bit of a pod, I'm going to get him in. Say the Titans have been giving up a lot of points, so you think, oh, they've been bad defensively, I think Val Holmes is going to have a good game. But potentially their stats might say that they've actually done very well against the fullback position specifically, and then Val Holmes comes out of that game scoring 45 points, and you said, what the hell? How did this happen? The Titans have been conceding so many points, but my fullback Val Holmes didn't get anything. I think doing that little bit of analysis really does help you kind of remove that surprise factor. That happens a lot, when you choose a player and they just don't do well. It did happen to me when I chose James Fisher-Harris last season. I had no idea why he was on such a run of bad games. To be fair, I still don't know why. The stats won't always tell the picture, and I have no idea how he just ended up going on that run. If someone wants to tell me, please let me know in the comments below, because that really burnt me last season. But I think doing some kind of basic analysis like this really then helps you kind of decide what kind of players that even say you want to be captaining as well. I think it really does help kind of doing this extra little bit of research, So I think, looking at the draw and also looking at then how different teams defend against other positions is a really, really useful tactic, and that will help you more often than not, I think, get your vice captain and captaincy decisions right, as well as in general just what kind of trades and what players you're bringing in. So next up, I've got making use of tools and calculators. So as you might have seen in my previous videos, I'm always quoting NRL SuperCoachStats.com, which is an unbelievable free website that does so much analysis in terms of this statistics and tools and calculators that it has on their website. It really does help you kind of visualize how different players perform and how they do against, say, different positions, and kind of what they've done historically in the past as well. Being able to make use of the tools and calculators on, say, like NRL SuperCoach Stats, it really does help you get ahead. So for example, in that kind of top graphic that I've got there, there's a quick summary of, say, Cody Walker and what he's done over the last 5 years in terms of his points average, his average per game, what his kind of PPM is. And I think this already gives you a little bit of a useful clue as to whether you think a player is going to perform well in the upcoming season. So say, for example, someone I've previously talked about in my second row forward video was, like, say, Jai Arrow. So he's obviously going to be really popular given that he's a well-known player in itself. but his PPM has kind of been in the decline in the past few years. And just looking at simple graphics like this that you can pull from NRL SuperCoachStats.com would show you this. So just having the stats and numbers behind players really helps you make a good informed decision, I think, on whether they're going to be a good buy or not. And then some of the tools that are on the website as well. They've got buy planning, so that helps you plan for the buyers around the origin period. It has got a price change calculator, which is not going to be exact, but it's a very, very close, good estimate. So, for example, that's what I've got in that bottom picture there. This is Cody Walker, and he's currently listed at 656k. And you can put in different scores for the next few rounds if you see how his price might change over that period. That really does help you then kind of plan when you might want to be picking up certain players. So say, for example, in his first game, he's got Melbourne, and his third game, he's got the Roosters. So you could say potentially in round 1, he might score 60. And in round three, he might score 65 or 203. It's the Roosters. We don't quite know. But so you put these scores in what you think you might get. And it will show you what kind of price change might occur. And so if you think that, okay, yeah, I'm confident that based on the tough opponents that he's got in round 1 and 3, I think he's going to go down by 50k, for example, I think then it's a better time to pick him up in round 4 as opposed to, say, getting him in round 1. So I think it's really important to be using these kind of tools to kind of predict price, predicting break even. And so break even is the score that a player would have to meet in a certain round to kind of maintain their price value. So say, for example, if Cody Walker's got a break even of 100 and he goes and scores 100, his price won't change at all in the next round. Obviously, if he scores above that, his price will increase, and if he scores below, his price will decrease. So these are all the kind of tools that I only really started using halfway through last season. And if we go back to my 2020 rank page, I really do think that was a good reason as to why I started improving my rank, because I kind of was able to better predict how player prices would move, and as a result I was able to then kind of plan my trades a little bit better. Really making use of your tools and calculators, I think, is a great way to get ahead in terms of your overall ranking. And finally, is this not the most obvious tip? Go with your gut. At the end of the day, SuperCoach is a game. The game is meant to be about having fun. Yes, it's all good to be having some competition where, when you get into, like, say, a money head-to-head league, or, just simple bragging rights over your mates, if you got more points than them. At the end of the day, the most satisfying part of the game for me is when you have a gut call on, say, a player or a captaincy decision, and you just do it. People tell you it's a bad decision. You don't do it. That player's junk. Don't bring them in. You do it anyway. You might captain them or something like that, and they go off, and all of a sudden you look like a hero. That's the time when it's the most satisfying for me to play the game. And it's always, for me, like, I hate when I get talked into, say, a certain player who I'm not, say, sold on, but I bring them in anyway because that's the popular player that everyone's bringing in, and they don't do well. And you had a kind of gut feeling that you didn't think they were going to do well, but you kind of just picked them anyway to go with the crowd. I think that's always when you feel really unsatisfied, with the game itself. So I think it's really important to go with your gut. For example, my kind of moment, I think, last year potentially was AJ Brimson. When he came back from injury, he had just scored his 18-point game, but I saw his price was low. I needed, like, a dual 5'8" fullback, I think, at the time, because I think I needed someone who I think I could flip to Ponga when he came back from an injury, something like that. And I think I saw the Titans had decent games, and so I thought, I'm just going to get Brimson. He was like 450k, and he just went on that ridiculous end to the season, and he didn't end up leaving my team at all. He was that good for me. But it was a bit of a gut call where I said, what, I think I'm just going to go with that guy. No one's really talking about him. He was a bit of a pod. I'll get him, and he just performed amazingly well for me. So you just create, like, I really like Brimson. I really want to get into my team at some point because I've got, like, a connection with him now, I feel, from SuperCoach gods. So I think, yeah, going with your gut is always going to make the game the most fun for a player. And at the end of the day, I think that's what it's all about. Yes, we love talking into the stats and the numbers. We want to be talking strategy and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's a game. We're just trying to get points. We're just potentially maybe going to try to have some bragging rights with our mates. So I think don't take it too seriously. And I think having those gut calls that pay off for you really is the most rewarding thing. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. Hopefully those 8 tips, you found useful, and hopefully you can implement some of them or take some of the advice that I've given on board. So if you guys did like this video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up on the video, and do let me know in the comments as well if there's any kind of strategies or tips that you yourself use that I might not have touched on. Leave them in the comments below. I'd be really keen to see what else other players do during the season that really helps them improve their overall ranking. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please also consider subscribing, as I'll be continuing to put out videos during the NRL SuperCoach season. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.